It's time to chill out and bake ahead. Hello and welcome to WJTS in.form. Joining us in the studio is Jan Dougan, the extension educator for Purdue in Du Bois County. And Jan, we're going to talk about chilling out, baking ahead. What do we mean by this?
Well, you know, at different times of the year, people want to have special baked items for an event or a celebration or a family gathering or a holiday. And, you know, everybody's busy. There's lots of things going on. There's children's activities, there's community activities, there's work, you know, and it just seems like it's harder and harder for people to get things done that they want to get done. So I just want to recommend to people that you don't have to do everything at the last minute.
Do it ahead. Or if you're going to bake, you're probably thinking, I'm going to make a bunch of cookies, but I can't really eat all of these at one time.
That would be good not to eat all of them at one time, Bill.
That's tempting, but so the chilling out part, I guess, is freezing some of the baked goods that you have.
Yeah, that's right. So we can go ahead and start planning what we want to do, how we want to do it. And if we want to have a cookie baking session one night, maybe even have family and friends over and help out and bake a lot of cookies, we could freeze them. So cookies freeze rather easily. Most types of cookies freeze rather easily. And I brought some cheat sheets with me with some information from some food specialists as far as freezing and things and what can be and can't be. And I think some people will be surprised because most cookies you can prepare and bake as usual and then you can freeze, except for those cookies that are really fragile. They don't freeze very well. Like there's different types of holiday cookies that people make that are really delicate and fragile, and they would not freeze very well. Or meringue-based cookies, cookies containing beaten egg whites, such as macaroons, that type of cookie, it doesn't freeze well. But most cookies do freeze okay. So you bake them, you cool them properly, then you pack them in a rigid container. Like there's all kinds of containers out there that are available. You might even want to put some moisture vapor resistant freeze wrap in between the layers so they don't stick together. And then you want to make sure too that you fill your container, because what we found is containers that have too much air, that can lower the quality of the food item that's in there. So you might want to just even take wax paper and crinkle it up and put it on top of the cookies to keep them in place and to protect that airspace so that the cookies stay frozen really nicely.
So if you're making sugar cookies, you can freeze those. But
yes, you can.
Should you ice them first?
Well, frostings do freeze okay. The best frostings for freezing are fudge frostings, uncooked powdered or confectioner's sugar frosting made with fat. Cooked frostings, 7-minute frostings, and other egg white frostings don't freeze as well. So what I like to do with the sugar cookies, though, because that's the fun of sugar cookies, especially at the holidays, is frosting and decorating. So to make it easier for the whole family to be involved in that, I like to go ahead and make my sugar cookies. Then I'll freeze those sugar cookies, and I always put a piece of wax paper in between each layer in the frozen container, in the container that I'm putting in the freezer. And then I'll take them out, let them thaw in the refrigerator, and then we'll have a frosting decorating party. So that eliminates, you know, all the time and the intensity of the time that it takes to make the sugar cookies, roll them out, cut them, bake them, and everything. But we still get in on the fun of frosting and decorating.
Is it a good idea to freeze dough?
You can freeze dough. In fact, if you want fresh baked cookies and you really want to impress family and friends, you can go ahead and make your cookie dough. And then what I like to do is, like, let's say chocolate chip or oatmeal cookies. I like to make those, make the mix, and then I use an ice cream scoop that's a small ice cream scoop that I can scoop out the dough, and I drop a ball onto the wax paper onto a baking sheet. And then I freeze that on the sheet, and then I take the little balls of cookie dough and put those in a freezer type zip bag to freeze, labeling so I know what's the oatmeal and what's the chocolate chip cookie, and put those in the freezer, and then I can just pop those onto a baking sheet and bake them whenever I want some fresh cookies.
Now you put them each individually on a sheet to freeze them because they freeze better that way.
Yes.
If you've got cookies you made, should you also freeze them first time that way, or after they've been baked, you can put them all in the bag and then how should you freeze those?
So there's two ways that you can do the cookies. You can put them, when I freeze them individually, I like to put them on what we call a cooling rack. And I would set the cooling rack in the freezer and lay the cookies on the cooling rack. Then when they're frozen, which is going to happen within the next 12 hours, I take them off and put them in zip-type freezer bags because they're already frozen. But I also use containers, plastic-type containers that are rigid for freezing purposes. I would put a layer of cookies in the bottom, then I would put a layer of either freezing paper, parchment paper, or wax paper in between the layers to keep them from sticking.
Okay, and then pop them in the freezer.
Yep, and then pop them in the freezer.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
Now, why would you freeze them as opposed to putting them in a Ziploc bag and putting it in your cabinet? Will they last longer?
Yes, they're going to last longer. They're going to taste better. You're not going to eat them all before the event because you're going to know that they're in that cabinet, right?
Right. That's
And
true.
you're probably
right
going to eat them before the event even happens.
How long can you keep something in the freezer, baked goods?
So cookies, let's see, the recommendation for cookies is 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, it's a great way too if you're a smaller family, if you're an empty nester and you still like cookies and you say, well, I don't bake them anymore because I don't want to eat them all or I can't get through them all. You could bake them and you could freeze them. And then you could portion control. You could have a couple for dinner at night. And, if you got them out of the freezer by the time you were done with dinner, they'd be thawed and ready to eat. Or you could also thaw them in the microwave if you would want to.
Okay, that's an easy way to do
Yeah.
it. Now, can you also freeze pies, breads, rolls, things like that?
Yes, you can. And, depending upon the type of roll it is, like yeast roll, you can freeze them before baking, you can freeze them after baking. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. Breads, like loaves of bread, you can freeze the whole loaf if you need to. Or, again, you can use the same technique that I talked about with the cookies and putting the cooling rack in the freezer, laying the slices of bread on the cooling rack. Then when they're frozen, put them in zip-type bags to keep in the freezer for use. I find that's very helpful in our household because we are empty nesters and our children are gone and it's just the two of us and it's really hard for us to get through a loaf of bread during a week. But I always have whole grain bread in the freezer that I can get to if we want toast for breakfast or if we want a sandwich for lunch or dinner or if we need bread for some other reason.
And a smart thing to have if you're going to freeze like this is a magic marker.
Yes, it is. And why would you need a magic marker,
You got to put
Bill?
the date. Well, you got to put what it is so you know what it is. But the date is key because you put it in, you think, okay, I know I'm going to use this. But when 2 months passes by, you really forgot the date you put those in.
And doesn't time just fly by anymore?
Yes, it does.
That
Yes.
you just don't really think about that. And so that's such a good tip is to really put the date on there so that we know. You also asked about pies, and you can freeze pies. Different types of pies. Not all pies can be frozen. A meringue pie does not work well to freeze. And a pumpkin pie does not work well to freeze. But you can go ahead and if you make your own crust, you're still making your own pie crust, you can make your pie crust. You can freeze the pie crust. Make sure that it's in a rigid container or maybe it'll fit into a zip-type freezer bag that you can freeze it. It's already in the pie pan that you want to bake it in. You can even freeze the ball of dough if you want and then get it out early enough to roll it out and make it. I like to go ahead and put it in my pan so that work is already done. Freeze it, then I just have to take it out of the freezer and put my filling in it and bake it. So that's an easy way to do it. Pumpkin, if you want to, a lot of times in the fall people like to really do the pumpkin pies. So if you want to cook your own pumpkin to use in your pie, I recommend cooking the pumpkin in the oven, taking the pulp and blending it or putting it in a processor. You can freeze the pumpkin pulp and you can freeze it in 2-cup increments, which is about what you use in a pie. So then you just have to take that out and use that, add your eggs, your sugar, your seasonings, whether you add cinnamon or nutmeg to your pumpkin pie, and add your milk that you're going to use, and then dump it into your frozen pie crust, and you're ready to go for a pumpkin pie.
Now let's say you make an apple pie. Can you freeze that?
Yes.
Now, an apple pie comes out of the oven. It's done. It's very hot. Should you let it cool there, put it in the refrigerator, then let it cool, or put it in the freezer hot?
You don't want to put it in the freezer hot.
Okay.
No.
Same with the cookies or bread or anything.
Right. You want to let things cool before you put them in the freezer. An apple pie, you might want to eat it warm with a little dip of ice cream on it, or some whipping cream on top of it. But you could freeze leftover apple pie if you wanted to. Okay. There's usually only 8 pieces in a pie. So usually there's not a whole lot left over.
No. And that's another thing about it. If you do a pie or bread or cookies, with Ziploc bags, with the plastic containers now, it's so easy to portion it out.
Yes, it is.
So that you don't take a whole pie out and have to thaw out a whole pie and then feel like you have to eat that whole pie. You can just put sections of it in, or just so many cookies in a bag.
Yeah. You know, there's lots of other desserts that you can freeze also. Cheesecake, you could freeze cheesecake after you've baked it, and it would be ready to use. Cobblers, those kinds of things, they can be frozen. There's just lots of different things. And if viewers have particular questions of things they like to do, if they want to give us a call at the Purdue Extension office, it's 812-482-1782, and we will be glad to try to find the answer to your question or help you out with what you want to do. The one thing we haven't covered is candies. And a lot of people don't realize that candies can be frozen, except for like a chocolate-covered cherry, that type of candy, if you make it at home, because it's probably going to burst. But fudges can be frozen, barks can be frozen. A lot of the different kinds of candies that we like to make for celebrations and family gatherings, they can be frozen. One of the things sometimes people see on dark chocolate or milk chocolate is a whitish coat that happens during the freezing. That's called a bloom. That's the fat in the chocolate that's showing itself. But after it comes to room temperature, it will disappear.
Oh, okay.
It shouldn't be there anymore.
Well, say you go to the grocery store and chocolate chips are on sale, and so you want to buy several bags. You could use one bag and freeze the other 2? Is that okay to freeze those?
Or I've not ever done that, but yes, you could do that.
Okay, but they might come out with that little white on it.
Yes,
but just ignore that and they'll thaw out. They'll be fine.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. But I think we need to watch buying in bulk. I think sometimes our intentions are good.
Because we think we're going to save, but if you don't use it.
Yeah, if you don't use it, you're really not going to save, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Jan, thank you very much for coming in.
You're welcome.
Use the freezer as you go baking. You may think that's kind of an oxymoron. You bake, makes it hot, and then you freeze it, makes it cold. But it's a good way to save the food or to spread out some of the cookies that you've had made. Jan, thank you very much for being our guest. Our guest is Jan Dougan. She is with Purdue Extension. By the way, you can call Jan at the Purdue Extension office in Du Bois County, or whatever extension office you're in. Call your extension agent. They would be glad to come and talk to your group or to give a program about different topics. And Jan covers a lot of different topics here on WJTS in.form. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching. We're local people watching local people.